Welcome back again to the Becoming Shameless podcast. I am your host, Nicholas Wallace.
I'm your host, Josiah Baines.
And today, our episode is Can We Talk? Shout out that man, Tevin Campbell. So, today we'll be discussing communication. So, we'll be starting off with why communication is important. Why is it important, Josiah?
For me, communication is important because it sets the guidelines for everything in your life. So whether I'm communicating about what I want in life or communicating about what I don't want in life, communicating my expectations from other people, communicating my boundaries, communicating just anything in life. So you have to be able to talk, and not just talk, but talk effectively. So whoever is listening to me understands, or at least is able to kind of get the picture of what I'm saying in the way that I'm trying to say it. So that doesn't always happen, and we'll get into that later, but
it doesn't happen most times. They say communication is key, but everybody's is locked for some reason. So, but we'll definitely for sure get into that. Communication definitely is something that I feel as if is the not the foundation, but it is the glue that holds relationships together. Because with the lack of communication, no relationship will ever stand or be healthy.
I would say not only just relationships, but everyday life. Because even in the workplace, or even with whatever you're doing, you have to be able to communicate. So that's a really important part that I feel like people talk about a lot, and they say is really important, but do we really work on communicating? Are we really actively paying attention to how we're communicating and how we're expressing ourselves, verbal and non-verbally, which we'll get into later?
And I feel as if in terms of communication, there is a sense of vulnerability that you have to have.
Absolutely.
To be effective at communicating. And I feel like a lot of times people don't communicate because to communicate leaves yourself weak, and it leaves your emotions very vulnerable, because with the lack of communication, a lot of it stems back to control. Most people want control of scenarios that they're in, whether it be in the work world, relationship wise. You want to have sense control of your own emotions. You don't people have their wall up. They don't want to get their feelings hurt, or they don't want to, be disappointed or let down. So they will reduce the communication they have with other people, and in doing so, it actually does more damage than good.
On that point, I also think that a lot of the times, how you say, people are kind of holding back their cards. Not only are they holding back because they want to have control, but they don't know how. They're a little bit, I know for me at least, I'm a little bit afraid or nervous about how somebody's gonna respond if I truly tell you.
It's out of your control.
How I feel exactly. So you gotta be able to leave stuff, like he said, out of your control, and be able to accept the fact that not everybody is gonna be able to accept what you have to say. But on that topic of vulnerability, right? I had heard this little phrase, was that the difference between vulnerability and transparency, right? So a lot of people say they're transparent, right? But are you vulnerable? So transparency, if you think about a house, transparency is me opening up all the windows, and you can see inside my house, right? But you can't see everything that's in the house just from the windows. So vulnerability is bringing you inside,
opening that door,
and walking you through all the stuff you can't see from outside the window. So that's like the next level. Like, you can be transparent, but that next level where you can be vulnerable too, that's a really, really important part with communication. And you don't gotta be vulnerable with everybody though. You can pick and choose who you want to be vulnerable with, but just do know it's a lot more a better relationship you have with somebody when you are transparent and vulnerable. If you're hot, humble, open, and transparent.
And
Shout out.
You said earlier in regards to holding the cards, I'm gonna reiterate a point that I said the last episode. But when you do not communicate with people, you hold them hostage to the state of your own mind. People can't read your mind, no matter how much you're around them, no matter how much time you spent with them. They aren't you. No one can fully understand you and how you think just like you. You're not being fair, and it's very selfish if we're being completely honest. Because not only are you like not being vulnerable and truthful with them, you're holding your emotions against them at the expense of something that's not there and within their even knowledge. So you cannot hold that against people if you don't communicate your needs and wants.
That's facts.
Very much facts. Like people stay doing it, they'll be like, they should have knew better. How?
Exactly.
How can they know better? Unless you, I understand there is nonverbal communication, but if you don't out your mouth communicate your needs, wants, or your disturbances, then you can't hold it against somebody because we all have different triggers. We all grow different. Some people, when they're scared, you know what I'm saying, they laugh. Mm-hmm. Some people cry. So someone seeing you have a certain reaction in your body, they may respond completely different. They may think that's a different response because they may laugh in a situation while you're crying. Mm-hmm. So they're not understanding the severity of the situation to you. So it's really not fair if you hold them hostage to the state of your own mind.
Right. I know that's a big problem that I'm gonna be honest. I'm a constant work in progress on communication. Right. I just recently started to really start to communicate and really start to work on how I talk, who I'm talking to, when I'm talking, and just being more conscious about that stuff, right? I feel like now it's kind of like I'm gonna say whatever I want and however I want. Like, okay, like that'll only get you so far. And most people are talking about the relationship space, but when you know what I'm saying, you talking about outside with strangers and other people and stuff like that, or in the workplace or where you work at or wherever you're at, you gotta always be conscious of a public voice versus a private voice, and having that public space when you're communicating with people, you have to be very diligent with how you talk. I can't talk to the same people outside the way I talk to the same people inside my house, and it's not like it's like a disrespectful type of thing. It's more like a free, more open type of thing. You know what I'm saying? Like we be saying, calling each other, nowadays calling each other N-word and stuff like that, and you know, a lot of people take hints to that outside, especially if you're around, a certain group of people. So it's really important to always be mindful and to always keep yourself in check. Like we said the last two podcasts, you always have to have that self checklist and always be aware of yourself and everything that you do. So that applies for communication too.
And so let's get into like one of the like subcategories. How do you have the conversation? See, a lot of times we say communication is key, but we never really address how do you even approach having those hard conversations? Because it will be hard to be like, oh, just talk to them about it. But not everybody knows how to approach it in a proper manner. So how do we do that?
I saw this video on TikTok. I don't know if I sent it to you. It was this guy. He has his best friend, right? So he goes to see her dance recital, and he's sitting there through the dance recital. He's like, man, like this sucks. Like in his head, he's like, this is a horrible recital. Like, he's just here to support his friend, right? And so she comes to him after. She's like, oh my gosh, how'd you like the show? Like in that moment, because a lot of people talk about communication and approaching, like you said, approaching that. And a lot of people say, I'm going to be honest, I'm going to be truthful no matter what, right? But just because you're being honest and truthful doesn't mean you have to be so, I don't want to say rude, but like so blunt and condescension. Is that a word?
Condescending?
Yeah, condescending, right? And so she was like, how did you like the show? And in that moment, he had to think. He was like, okay, I can either tell her that, because she's in a very happy space right now, right?
Yeah.
He recognized she just got off stage. She had a blast. You know what I'm saying? She worked really hard for this moment. So he could either be like, man, that show wasn't good. It wasn't a good show. I didn't like it. Or, right, he could choose the approach he chose. So he told her, he said, I'm really glad I was able to see you perform. And he just left it like that, right? He sidestepped the question, right? But later on, he didn't, because a lot of times when we say we communicate, right? I know for me at least, I would say I'll talk about it later, or I'll talk to you about it later, knowing dang well I'm not trying to talk to you about this later. Like I'm trying to avoid this conversation. But like he sidestepped the question in the moment, and then eventually a couple days later he called her. I mean, they were talking on the phone. He was like, "Do you really want to know how I felt about those?" And he told her all the details and stuff because it was a different space and different situation. So if you know in the setting, one thing that's important when you're approaching the conversation is knowing the setting of where you are and where that person is in the moment, right? Because a lot of times a lot of people think, well, this is how I feel in this moment, right? You can't, if you only say how you feel in the moment and not recognize how the other person is in the moment, then you know what I'm saying, it's always going to be a hard conversation, and communication is going to go all over the place. You're not going to understand what they're saying because they feel some way in the moment, and they're not going to understand what you're saying because you feel a totally different way in the moment. So that's something that I just recently, like this, I'm talking about recently, like within the past year, that I really had to learn and work on. So so what about you?
I'm gonna break it down to 5 questions. You kind of addressed the first one. Where am I? Is this the appropriate scenario or location to have this conversation? Like, I'm not about to have this conversation in a Kroger. I'm not gonna do this at Walmart. Like, is this the proper setting? Then who am I talking to? Because based on prior attempts of conversation, you may realize with some people, there literally is no point in even trying to get to that point because you know their response. Though I feel as if, because I am a big advocate of communication, if you feel like there's no point in talking to somebody and they're never receptive, I just think you should just end that relationship. So I'm not saying that's communicate, because if you can't communicate with somebody, which one of my values is, if I don't feel as if I could communicate with you openly and honestly without walking on eggshells, I don't want a close relationship. So make sure you communicate with people in your life. But if you can't, there's no point in having a relationship, in my opinion. Right. So who am I talking to? So it's going to go anywhere. Then, how are you? Like, what's the state of your mind? Because a lot of times, the other question after that is, how am I? Because a lot of times we go by the state of how I'm feeling. Oh, I feel this way. I'm going to talk my stuff. I'm going to address it here. And it's kind of like you don't take into account the mindset or what the mentality the other person's having in that instance, because you don't know how their day went. You know what I'm saying? So that might be a big burden on them in that instance. So I think it's important to ask, how are they before I speak? Then ask, how am I? Because obviously if I felt the need to communicate it, I know how I feel. So let me make sure it's the right time for them, because if they're not in the right headspace, they're not even going to be receptive. So say they're already in a bad headspace and they're already angry, there's a saying, it's like, angry ears don't listen. So how are they, then how am I? You know what I'm saying? And then, you know what I'm saying, also acknowledging, you know what I'm saying, how do I sound? Because how we treat others more with us to them. So like, after you ask yourself, how am I? If I'm not in a good headspace, how do I sound? Because I'm in a bad mental space, I might be being condescending without my knowledge. Right. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's the proper way to address communication or address a conversation. I remember one time I addressed you about something that you did that upset me, and you didn't really respond. And you know that's not normal. I'm like, oh, he didn't respond. And you called me the next day, and you were like, I'm sorry, I didn't respond instantly, but your natural instinct is to defend yourself, and I didn't want to take away your moment. So I had to think about it and process it, and now I can respond. And I actually do that now to this day. If I don't feel like I can respond, I'll wait. And I remember I was reading Proverbs recently, and they were and it addressed that. It was like, you know what I'm saying, if something happens, basically wait. Sometimes you have to wait before you respond, because, you know what I'm saying, when you respond in that moment, you might do something that's going to be counterproductive to what you actually wanted to do, which is probably healthy, but it's going to be counterproductive because of how you did it. So if I'm upset with you, you know what I'm saying, I may say something I can't take back because I'm upset in that very moment, which, you know, I feel like we all as people have done. And sometimes it costs you that bond that you were actually trying to grow. You might have just ended it.
Right. And on that note of saying stuff that you don't mean, I feel like a lot of times people be like, you know, well, if you said something you don't mean, that means you really wanted to say it, but now you just got to that point where you got the courage,
got that battery.
Do you think that's true?
I think to an extent it's true, but you may not. Okay, so like in some instances we're biased because of our desires, right? Even when it comes to people's roles in our lives. So how I view you is always going to be biased and altered. So say, but if I want more from you, I might be like, oh, you're this. But in reality, I'm saying that because of a place of hurt. I generally don't think you're that. It's because what I want from you, you're not living up to my expectations. Right. So to somebody who may drink casually, right, and say if I'm not a person who drinks, right, oh, you're a freaking drunk when I'm mad, but I generally don't think you're a drunk. I just don't want you to drink.
Right. Okay. Yeah. No. That's. I feel like that. Right. I feel like that's true, and also I feel like, I just don't feel like that's a true thing that people just say stuff that they mean. They just have the courage. I feel like when you're angry, right? If you really sit there and think about those times where you were like really hot and angry, right? The only thing you're thinking about is yourself again. Like you're just like
make yourself feel better.
Yeah, that's the only thing. Like you just want to be able to do something that is just like, because you're so angry in the moment, and if you think, you know what I'm saying, you so high and mighty that you don't do that stuff, just wait until you get a little bit down the road in life and something really makes you upset. Maybe, you know what I'm saying, you got kids. I can see now, if you think about your parents, right, those times where they said they might have said some wild stuff, or they might have did something that you didn't really feel comfortable with, and you know, you get to a point where you kind of understand that, like, dang, like, you know what I'm saying, my parents came from a long day of work or something like that. Maybe they had a rough day. Like, you don't know what their day was, and then they come home, right, and you know what I'm saying, you might have not did something that they asked you to do, and they blow up on you, and you like, dang, like, you know what I'm saying? Exactly.
I forgot to get out the freezer.
You don't even know how their day was though. So, but on that point of what you were saying about that conversation that we had, that was a step, and now the next step for me, I feel like, is being able to, because first of all, I was wrong for just not saying nothing in the moment, and then just, you know what I'm saying, like, I should have just said, like, you know, let me take some time to process. Exactly, because that's like something that, I'll tell you, that is something that I get caught for all the time. Like, I would literally just be quiet. Like, if somebody said something I don't know, I would literally just sit there like this, and I was just looking. They'd be like, "Are you good?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm good." Like, I won't say like I'm processing or something like that. So that's another step of communication, man. But it get deep, bro.
And not just that. I'll talk about I'm reel it back. It kind of gets you back to the question we had last week, where sometimes the need to communicate kind of halts your process of actually feeling your emotions. Fact. Or sometimes you feel the need to respond instantly because you just feel like the need to respond to somebody for the sake of the relationship, that you don't even allow yourself the privilege to fully feel your emotions and process the emotions by going through them, which I myself struggled with personally, which we had this conversation where, like, I can admit that because I try to communicate very effectively, I don't allow myself to fully feel the emotion into its entirety, because I want to process it so I can communicate so we can move forward. But then it's like, in that process, I can't. Internally, I haven't moved forward, even though I've convinced myself I have, because then I'll hit a trigger, and it's like, oh, I really never processed it properly. But for sure, I definitely think what we were talking about before, like, it's very important to, like, how am I, because that part actually, like, affects a lot of stuff. Because let's be real, like, when you're saying how, like, people respond at us, like, in a certain way when they're mad, let's be real, this is the Becoming Shameless podcast.
Yeah.
I believe in most emotions. I don't believe in any type of person. I think everything when it comes to emotions is a spectrum.
Yeah.
Nobody entirety is good. Nobody's bad in their entirety. Some do more good than others. Some do worse than others. Some people are more spiteful than others. Some aren't as spiteful. But to an extent, I think we're all spiteful. Because when you're mad, let's be real, a lot of times in your heart, to make you feel better about it, because we have humans, we have pride, you want to hurt that other person in that moment. And people want to act like we're so good as people, but let's transparent. Like, let's be vulnerable too. Sometimes you generally want to hurt the person that hurts you for a sense of, like, oh, they didn't get over on me. And a lot of times that's the case. That's why I think it's important to ask, how am I, so you don't have, or you have less of those spiteful moments, or you can reduce it. It's a defense mechanism, because your ego, most things are ran by the ego. The ego wants to protect your sense of self. That's why a lot of times people hold you accountable. People get very defensive, because a lot of times, to acknowledge the truth, you have to be okay with acknowledging person that you believe yourself to be. And you're
Absolutely.
probably not as good as a person that you think you are, which, I don't believe in the good person concept.
Yeah, that's when you think about that response, that defense mechanism, right? I was just reiterating. I don't know if I talked about this on a different podcast or we were just having a conversation, but that age of like 0 to 10 is like where all of that stems from. Like if you sit there and try to recall those 0 to 10 memories, right? Everything that you react out of now, like every thought or every like not every thought, but like it's a compilation of different stuff that's happened in your life, but most of that stuff is rooted in that 0 to 10 years. Like
the child is important.
0 to 10, like when you sit there and you really try to think back and recall all those interactions and maybe traumatic stuff that's happened to you or whatever's happened to you from 0 to 10, like it's crazy because you really start to realize like, dang, like I'm so defensive in that space because I don't know, maybe something happened with a family member, or maybe something happened at school, in elementary school, or maybe something happened when I was playing sports, or you know what I'm saying. It's crazy. So when you communicate, you always have to. And I've seen a lot of TikToks like this, right? Mm-hmm. When in a relationship, right? This dude, he posted on TikTok. He was like, he has to recognize how he's talking to his girlfriend because. He was like, because I'm really talking to her, and it switched to a picture of his girlfriend, but when she was younger.
That inner child.
You always have to, like, you always talking to somebody's inner child. Really.
That's what it is.
You really talking to somebody's inner child at all times.
You gotta be gentle with it.
Like, oh my goodness, like, you really, like, that was, like, a really big revelation for me, was just, like, dang, like, we really are, like kids, like, for like,
we're all kids.
Even, like, somebody who's 50, like they still reacting off of that 0 to 10 age, and
I always tell you that I always be like it's that inner child. Most things your inner child, like if you change, I'm right to say, like if you change the tone of someone's voice when they're like, well, you did this, you sound like a little kid in preschool. Well, he did this, you sound like a little ass kid. Like, no disrespect, but you do a lot of stuff that because from the age of 0 to 10, you learn how to process, and how you process of things never necessarily changes.
Right.
You may mature and you may grow, but how you process stuff rarely changes for most people, and that's why a lot of people, when we be like, oh, they act like little ass kids, because that's basically their inner child. They're still a little kid. They haven't outgrown certain things because of how they process stuff as children. That's why when people have kids, make sure you teach them stuff properly and you give them a lot of gentleness and grace, because you're going to raise adults that don't know how to effectively process or, communicate their feelings, their needs, or what hurts them,
So now, right, we prefaced before the conversation, how we approach that conversation. So now you're in the conversation, right? Ish probably went left, right? You know what I'm saying? It was supposed to go
right.
The stuff went left. So now you in an uncomfortable conversation, right? How are you navigating your way through this? Say somebody is not being receptive, or they keep cutting you off, which I know is a big.
I hate that.
It's a big thing for people our age in that 18 to 22, 25 range. Like people hate getting cut off, and even above and below and stuff. But so how are you navigating through this uncomfortable conversation? Maybe, you know what I'm saying, you feel yourself getting heated, or maybe, so what you doing?
What I'm doing? If I leave my house and I'm driving somewhere and I see that there's traffic and I'm just trying to, get some food or something, I'm gonna make that U-turn. I'll make that U-turn. Because sometimes I think people don't realize the importance of revisiting. Not everything has to happen on your timing.
That's good.
It doesn't have to happen on your timing.
That's a bar,
you know what I'm saying? If I go outside and it's raining, it's pouring down, I can't see, because me trying to go get that food, you know what might happen? I might try to take a turn, make a turn in that conversation, and I might hydroplane and crash. So if I see the weather outside is bad and it's pouring like that, I'll either make a U-turn, or I just won't, you know what I'm saying? Or if I'm already knowing how the weather's going to be, if I check my forecast, if I check that forecast and I know that, I already planned, I'll just do this on another day.
Right.
When the weather is sunny and it'll be easy, nice breeze, But I'm not gonna even if it's getting to that point because when you're going out in weather that is stormy, you don't just put you at risk. You put the person that you might crash into at risk as well. So for the safety of everybody, I think it's best we revisit.
How would you address? Because I know me, I'm somebody who will instantly just shut down. Like if say it's raining outside, say it's the same situation. Say it's raining outside, I'm stuck in traffic. I'm trying to get some food, right? And it starts pouring. I'll just pull to the side, turn my car off, and just sit there. I'm not even. You know what I'm saying? I'm just going. You know, people get to the like, okay, be like, all right, okay.
But that's not necessarily bad because if it's pouring like that and you pull to the side because you know if you drive you might hurt yourself, and you're waiting for the right weather because it may stop raining, then you could keep going once it stops raining. You see what I'm saying?
That's
you
true.
Pick up what I'm putting down.
That's true.
You know what I'm saying? I think it's important to like I said when you know the weather, analogy obviously, but once you know the weather, how you go about it, I feel like it's better to just halt. The Bible says to be still. I think it's important to know to be still because when you keep pushing something, or it's kind of like lifting weights, right? If you keep trying to push, right, and the weight's so heavy, you're gonna strain the muscle, and it may fall back on you.
Facts.
So you have to know when to put that rack up and then revisit it. Take a rest sometimes. That's why you rest between your sets, right? Know when to rest.
It has to be a mutual because sometimes you get people some people trying to back out, right? You know what I'm saying? And the other person is like, nah, you ain't backing out this conversation. We staying right here. Like, so it has to be like I said, that communication has to be set beforehand, in a way where it's like, okay, if we get in this space, what are we doing, right? And you really have to preface. You know, a lot of people talk about. I don't think it's talked about enough. Boundaries with people. I don't think a lot of people really establish their boundaries and realistic.
They don't.
Realistic boundaries, like
we'll talk that stuff.
Being honest with yourself, right? I was watching, of course. If y'all don't know, I'll be watching The Basement with Tim Ross, right? I was watching the episode last week. I think it's the episode I sent you, and he was talking about dang, oh my gosh, I forgot that quick. Well, I guess God didn't want me to talk about that, so
it's all good. And I think healthy like boundaries, like me, I try to when I'm like dealing with like someone, I have the conversation like one of my boundaries is you get 3 arguments out of me, not 3 debates, not 3 discussions where we're disagreeing. 3 arguments, because I'm not going to tolerate you yelling at me, because I'm aware of the inner child. I never liked being yelled at as a child. I never liked being cussed at. As a grown man, I'm not going for it. So I'm not telling you, I was like, you get 3 out of me, then I will cut you off, because I'm not about to fight a losing battle, because if you're not willing to actually participate, because people don't realize, people always be like, oh, I'm trying. It has to be a mutual thing. You're both trying, both willing to communicate. If it's just one of us, I'm going to strain myself, because yes, we always talk about you can't pour from an empty cup, but when you pour into an empty cup, you have nothing left, and you're going to be drained. So I'm not going to do that to myself. So I think it's important to address that, like, when we don't agree, like you said, how will we handle it? Me, if you're getting riled up, we can revisit it, but you're not about it. One thing you're not going to do is disrespect me. That's what I'm not going for. I do not be okay with you yelling at me or cussing me. I'm not tolerating that disrespect. If my parents don't even do that for real, you not. I know for sure you not. You definitely. You not gonna treat me low type of ways. If my parents don't even do that to me, you not about to talk to me like you crazy.
Right. It gets to a lot of people. I've heard that from a lot, especially from
girls.
I was about to call it a girl. Hey, listen, I'm just making a joke. Y'all don't take this for real, but the girls with. I can't say that because my dad got a bald head too, but the girls with them bald headed daddies, my daddy don't talk to me like that. You sure don't not talking to me like that.
For sure, like for real, like you not, because once you like you saying once you have a certain standard, I'm not gonna settle for that. Like I'm not tolerating no disrespect. I wasn't raised on that, and a lot of people have toxic, and I hate that word, but they have toxic communication styles, and they think it's healthy, and they feel like, well, I'm just voicing how I feel. It's how you talk to people matters. I generally, and excuse my language, but I don't give a fuck. Like, I don't give a fuck how you feel. Like, I care how you feel. No, I care how you feel, but I don't give a fuck. There ain't no excuse for you to talk to me like you crazy. Because at the end of the day, if I'm not approaching you with disrespect and I'm giving you a safe space for you to communicate, you don't have to disrespect me. But a lot of people they're used to it and they're comfortable with it, so they feel like, oh, at least I'm talking about it. But it's like, no, how you talk matters just as much as what you're talking about. Like, yes, I'm glad you're trying to communicate, but how you speak to me is just as important as what you're saying to me. You're not about to disrespect me.
I'm a little bit different in that area.
Yeah, you better than me.
And I'm still kind of growing and learning and stuff. But like, it's for me now. I'm trying to get to a point. I'm at least trying to get to the point. I'm not there, right? So it's not like somebody just come up to me, they start cussing. I'm just gonna be chill, right? But if I know somebody, right, and I know their background, again, I have to know them, right? A stranger or something, you know what I'm saying? That's not gonna fly. But if I know somebody and I know their background and where they come from and how they were raised, right? I'm not necessarily going to get, like I said, I'm not gonna tolerate it, right? I'm gonna be like, hey, like, Lord,
we disagree on this. We've had this conversation.
Yeah, but I'm not necessarily gonna buck back. Like, I'm not gonna sit there. If I know how where your background, and I know, you know what I'm saying, maybe you was for real, like you was in the streets like that, or maybe your parents, you know, talked to you like that, and you lived in a household where that was the norm, and you were from a place where that was the normal thing, right? If that, I'm saying, if that was the normal thing. Now, if you're doing this to intentionally be disrespectful, like you intentionally trying to spite me, I'm gonna be able to sniff that out, because I know from a mile away if you trying to purposely disrespect me. But if that was your norm, like, I would say people in oh my gosh, I want to say Scotland, right? If you ever if you ever heard some people from Scotland, right? They cuss every 5 seconds. If you from Scotland, let me know if this is right or not. I can't. It's one of them countries that's up there in them
Europe, just a European country.
Yeah, they cuss like
sailors.
Like they really just be cussing. So, you know what I'm saying, they cuss where it's not going to necessarily throw me off if they sitting there and that's their background, right? Because it's a different type of cadence that they have. If somebody is used to talking like that, and, you know, in a environment, you know what I'm saying, it's gonna be different than somebody who's purposely trying to disrespect you.
Bro, this very disagree. Where we could have healthy conversations here. So in regards to that, like, we can tie it to all episodes: acceptance, friendships, or relationships. In this, right? You said standing up, having boundaries, having healthy boundaries, right? Disrespect, whether intentional or not intentional, is still disrespect nonetheless. Once you communicate something, I don't care about your background. I always, like I said before, a lot of times where we all fall and we accept disrespect because you try to understand your way out of how you feel and stand on your boundaries. Like, yes, I understand their background. I don't condone it though. It crosses and violates my boundary. Yes, someone could be from the ghetto, but once you're around once you're around the age of, like, once you're like 5, you know right from wrong.
Yeah.
Once you're 10, you know enough to process how you feel.
Yeah.
So you know you don't have to disrespect somebody, even if that's their norm. They know it's okay, because the same way when you're at home, you might act a certain way. When you go to school, you're not gonna cuss out your teacher.
Facts.
So I don't give. Like I said, I don't give a damn if that's the norm in your house, because when you come outside in certain environments, you don't behave that way. That right there lets you know you have enough emotional regulation to control what you say. So don't tolerate no disrespect based on someone's upbringing, because in the day they know better. And when I say know better, not like we said earlier where you can read someone's mind, but in a sense where you know it's a time and place to speak, because no one acts like that in every environment. You're not gonna go to church cussing.
Yeah.
You feel what I'm saying? So if you know you can't speak like that in every scenario, then you know that it's not okay to cuss or disrespect somebody because of your upbringing. You know better. So at that point, it's not an excuse. But still communicate that you don't like the disrespect. But stand on your boundaries. Sure. Like, what?
For sure. I would have to say the cursing part. In terms of cursing, right? I think there's sometimes where people just
or being mean. When I say disrespect, I don't mean just cussing.
Yeah.
Any those forms of disrespect.
Like I said, I'm working towards this, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
if it's a situation now, I'm not gonna react how I'm describing, but it's like I'm trying to understand more of, like I said, I have to know who I'm dealing with to preface all of this.
Know your audience.
And it's, for me, I want to be able to respond in a way, right? Like I said, I don't want to bug back, because that's the first, when you're, especially from a male perspective, right? Especially a male, come from male, from anybody. If you're a male and somebody's talking to you crazy, your first instinct is
Defend yourself.
exactly like if like somebody is
Boy,
trying
what?
to, like exactly like that's, and I feel like not only just for males, for females too, but that's like a big thing with males. And if you don't believe me, if you want to try your boyfriend, girlfriend, boy best friend or whatever, you can definitely see, talk to them a little crazy, a little out of the octave of your normal range, and
that tone.
and you'll find out. But I'm saying, I want to be able to get to a space where I don't instantly bug back, right? I'm able to step back, and I'm able to say, hey, like, I'm able to say, I understand you're frustrated right now, or I understand this might be the case, and you're gonna need to. But some people, and I've had to go through this. Some people don't hear you unless you cuss at them. Like, it's crazy. Like, some people do not hear you. Some people do not hear you unless you are yelling at them. Like, you can talk to them in a regular tone, but until you start yelling and cussing, they will not hear you. Like, they will not even be able to receive what you're saying.
Let's redirect this in a way that adds to your point.
Mm-hmm.
Part of communication. How do we properly listen?
That's a part of communication. That's
So
a big part of communication.
Because we always talk about talking and getting your feelings out the way, but how do you, and I say actively listen, because a lot of times we're not listening, we're hearing.
Mm-hmm.
You're waiting your turn to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So you're missing the actual point of the message.
Right.
How do we people actively listen? Because I notice a lot of times, you ever be talking to somebody and y'all are disagreeing,
Mm-hmm.
but then they elaborate on their point and they just repeated what you said. In reality, you were on my side, but you weren't actively listening because you were so focused on the sentence, you weren't really focused on the whole book that I just said to you.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
One thing my mom always taught me is she would tell me to do something, and this was like, my high school years. She would either say something to me and tell me to do something, and she'd be like, okay, now repeat back to me exactly what I said, and what do you think I meant by what I said? Right. So then I would have to repeat back to her, if not word for word, pretty close, or the gist of what she was saying, and not no gist, because some people would be like, yeah, well, you said this and said this. Like, no, like have an actual understanding and try to grasp an understanding of what she said, and then be able to communicate how I feel or how I saw of what she said. And
that's good. Teach it to your children.
That's I feel like that really was able to help me, because I can retain information like a mug. Like you say something, I'm gonna be able to spit it back out to you, and word in detail. But I realized that within the past couple of years that recently I have to be able to not just spit back out what you said, but am I able to process, not only process, but be able to sympathize and empathize with whatever you said, and be able to, like we said before, come under. Stand under your understanding. So
the show.
That's a big part, like you said, of communication is listening. So how do you feel like listening should go?
I feel like people, why I'm a tight end. Why people hate eye contact when they're speaking? Because true communication, takes a lot of vulnerability. And you look somebody in their eyes, you can see a lot. People run from that vulnerability. But I love to make eye contact with people when they speak, because then it keeps me focused on the conversation, because I'm really looking at you and I can kind of empathize and sympathize more with you, because I can see like your emotions while you're speaking. But also I like to repeat not like the full sentence, but like say you're talking to me, and I'd be like, you're like, oh yeah, I went to the store. Okay, you went to the store, yeah. Or I'd be like, store? Okay, what store? You know what I'm saying? I
That
try to make sure,
curiosity.
yeah, like I make sure I ask questions about what they're saying. So in that moment, I could understand what's going on rather than hear them rant a lot and then I forget. I like to ask questions. So I think something like, oh yeah, oh this, oh yeah, or even just sometimes like, okay, yeah, just provide a little bit of feedback as they go along. Even though sometimes they'll be like, huh? And I'll be like, oh no, I was just like repeating what you said or just, you know what I'm saying, agreeing with you because I want you to know that I'm actively
listening.
Like, you read one sentence,
yeah,
I read that sentence. Rather than you tell me read a whole paragraph or say something, the whole thing, and then I respond back to one part. I want to be able to respond to everything you say. So as you speak, I'm going to let you speak, but once you stop speaking or you like say a point, I'm going to address it or acknowledge that point.
Yeah, and be able to, I like to do the same thing, be able to address it, acknowledge it, and then maybe somehow if I'm able to show you where we can relate in that subject. So I feel like for me at least, I want the other person to kind of be like, okay, he understands where I'm coming. So say, you know what I'm saying, I went to the store, or let's not use the store, let's use something a little bit more serious. Say something like yeah, I had say you might have got fired from work. You might have got fired from work that day, right? You know what I mean? Yeah, I got fired from work. And you got fired from work. Like, you know what I'm saying? Where were you working at? What was the situation? How'd you get fired? Yeah, you know what I'm saying? I might have, I don't know. Let's say
someone stole boxes on my day off.
Yeah, somebody stole some boxes on your day off. And I'm like, stole some boxes.
Friday
like what was in the boxes? Or like why they stealing? Like, you know who it was, stuff like that.
I don't know, Craig.
Be like, and then I would be like, I remember one time. I'm gonna be like, I can understand. I remember I felt that same feeling, or I can feel where you're feeling right now. I got fired too for my job a couple years back. You know what I'm saying? Is there anything I can do to help you through this situation, or you know what I'm saying, just to be able to show some kind of point of reference and be able to, because I feel like a lot of people want to be, is that what I said last week? People want to be seen, heard, and was that the 4 points?
Oh yeah, that's the 4 things. Yeah,
people want to be seen. Everybody wants to be
seen. Loved, accepted, understood. That's my 3, but then you added another one. I think you said seen.
Yeah, so
stole that from me, but it's whatever.
That's a big point that.
Be careful with that though. I feel like people don't like. One thing that I'm starting to realize is, say like in trying to relate. I'm gonna call it relate. We said you're relating. Trying to relate so they feel understood. Sometimes, if anything, sometimes does the opposite effect because sometimes someone just wants to be heard, and sometimes, honestly, no matter how much. When you try to relate, sometimes there's just some things in life I will never relate to. And I feel like sometimes people like they may like they're trying to be empathetic and sympathetic, so they try to relate something in their life to something, but it's like those two things don't relate. And when you do that, sometimes what you're doing on accident, you're silencing the person trying to communicate with you. Right. Sometimes, which I say, I work on myself. Sometimes you have to know when to shut up. Yeah. Just shut up and let them. Like sometimes it's not like. Sometimes I wouldn't even say actively listen. Sometimes you just have to not actively, actually listen. Just shut up.
You can't take me. You can only take people to the last place you've been. That's
because you guess what? If you don't know where you're going, you're gonna get lost.
Exactly. So if you never been there, then you can't. Like of course I'm not gonna. If somebody says some crazy and they're like, and I've never experienced that, then I'm like, okay, like I'm gonna just have to try to help them through this, you know, generically. Like I have no idea what this means or how they're feeling this because I've never been through that situation. So, but yeah, you can only take people to the last place you've been. So shout out to, like I said, Chance the Rapper said that.
Also, communication, where a lot of people they kind of hold this against people, but also like this is a part that doesn't get spoken up about enough. Listening. Or peeping body language, listening with the eyes. Look, what are you looking at? Like, how are their mannerisms when you speak about certain stuff? Sometimes, yes, we said communication is nonverbal, and yes, we do know that it's important to speak up. But also, if you should always still try to pay attention to body language. Like sometimes, like I can admit in my life, people will try to tell something they're excited, right? And it's kind of like in that moment, I'm kind of being a little selfish. I'm like, oh, I don't want to listen, or I don't want to see this. and you just peep how like their shoulders drop and like their head drops, the eyes drop, and it's like, wow. So then I try to make it up to them. So like, peep people's body language, because some people, like we said, everything goes back to your inner child. Some people didn't have a voice as children. Some people are used to disappointment. Some people have been through traumatic stuff, so they don't know how to communicate verbally. So, you know what I'm saying? Some people in the world are deaf. You know what I'm saying? So knowing how to be aware of stuff that can't be said is very important. So make sure you always try to look out for stuff that you see in a person, not always just rely on your ears, because not everybody has a voice. Come and talk to me. You know what I'm saying? Jodeci, Casey, JoJo, all of them.
I was in the I was doing my lift yesterday, and I saw this girl. She was on a leg press, and she did her set of leg press, and then she just stopped, and then she was just looking, and it looked like she was about to cry, right?
Oh dang!
And I wanted to. A part of me wanted to go up to her and be like, are you okay? Like, I didn't want to try to. I'm not exactly sure what that boundary is. Like, if that's some okay this day and age, or if people would accept that. Some people be like, stay out my business, or you know what I'm saying? Like, they'd be like, what you living? Like, I'm just saying, like, I noticed that you were. It looked like, from your body language, it looked like you were in a distressed moment, or you know what I'm saying, you were lifting for some reason that, you know, maybe you're trying to relieve stress, or maybe you
distract yourself.
Yeah, to distract yourself. So,
you know me, I'd put on that cape. I'd save it. Just kidding.
People, when you're looking at somebody's body language, it's important to not only just be able to, and because I do this a lot, I'll watch, like, no stalkish you type stuff, but I will just sit there and watch, and I will try to figure out how you respond in certain situations, or how you respond when something is said, or if you're in a certain setting or stuff like that. Because I know for me, when I'm around a whole lot of people that I don't know, and I'm sure a lot of people, when around people you don't know, you get quiet. Or I noticed about one of my friends, he's like a little brother to me. I realized that when he gets tired, or when he's upset, is the only time he's quiet. He's a really funny, real goofy kid, right? But when he's tired, he will just
detach,
just chill. So I don't know if he's like recharging his battery or something, or you know, or if he's mad. So I know in that situation, at least I know, like, okay, he's either, from my information I've gathered, he's either tired or he's upset. So, you know, and that's a part of knowing your setting. So all of this stuff compiles together to be able to know when is the right time to communicate. So in that situation, I know I'm not gonna sit there and start trying to play with him and mess with him like we be doing all the time. Like, dude tired, you know what I'm saying? Just give them their space. Let them do what they gotta do. You know what I'm saying? It's fine. So body language is a really important part of communication. That nonverbal, the eyes, the not necessarily words, but the sound effects, and you know, stuff like that. Like paying attention, and then, like I said, asking them, be like, are you this right now, or I don't really like somebody asking me like how I feel, or like if I'm tired or something, somebody asks me how I feel, I'm like, I'm not even gonna want to say. I go back to that. I just won't say nothing. I'll just be like.
And I like to say, like, the last thing we're gonna touch upon is, I'm gonna call it prep time, but because part of communication, I feel like it's important that we don't talk about, and we think it's very dismissive or disrespectful, depending on how you do it, is allowing people space. Like we said earlier, like revisiting. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes people need prep time so they can speak or get all their points out. And I think sometimes it's a little bit selfish, because when we communicate, most of the time we want people to do it when we're ready to talk about it on our time. But I think it's important to address prep time for having these conversations. You have to be in the right headspace. It has to be the right setting. Like, yes, we ask you to ask yourself those questions before you have the conversation, but since we're asking those questions, we have to make sure that we are also participating in it.
I want to go back to, because it's not sitting right in my soul.
It's not. Okay.
That whole thing with the disrespect and stuff like that, it's not sitting right in my soul, because I feel like I've gave off the impression of it's okay
To disrespect you.
to disrespect in general, right?
Oh,
and
no.
It's if you have like a certain background, and I don't want nobody to watch this and come and be like, well, that's the background I was raised in. Like, no, like
It's not
that's,
okay.
That's
You're an adult now. Grow up.
I feel like space is a better term for what I was trying to get to. Being able to hold space, being able to like you said, two things being true like before. Being able to
Multiple
understand
Mm-hmm.
where you come from and
That's
to
not
be
okay.
able to say, yo, like, you know, that's not okay, and not be having to be able to be like, that's not okay, you know what I'm saying, and start
And
getting
not butts, like you said.
being able to just be like, yo, what you were saying, that's not okay. I understand where you come from, and how you were saying what you said is not okay. Do not address
Don't
situations
do that.
like that
No more
again.
games.
So,
Facts.
holding space and like I said, just understanding, and everything ties in together, man. Understanding where the other person is, where you are, being able to hold space and just shut. I was reading a book called Tactical Empathy by Chris Voss. I listened to the audiobook because I don't really like sitting down and reading like that. I'll read the Bible.
I like to read.
The Bible probably the.
I guess I'm in a book club. I like to read.
Yeah, the Bible probably the book I read. If it's not, I'll listen to
The good word.
audiobooks. But yeah, I like reading. I like reading the Bible though.
That's good.
Pretty interesting.
Beautiful thing.
But yeah. What was I talking about? Oh, Tactical Empathy with Chris Voss.
You got so sidetracked.
My fault, bro. My fault. But he was saying that when it's a negotiating book, right? So this guy, Chris Voss, to give you a little bit of context, this guy, Chris Voss, he's an FBI. He was a retired FBI hostage negotiator, right? And he has now used these principles that he learned in hostage negotiation to negotiate in everyday life. So now, everything, he says, everything is a negotiation, right? So now your friendship is a negotiation because really you want something out of your friendship. Whether it's not, could be selfish, but say, I want you to open up more. I'm now trying to negotiate with you, and how can I get you to open up more? Like I said, I'm not going to sit there, like we said earlier, we're not going to sit there and try to force you to negotiate, or not negotiate, force you to try to open up. And it's kind of this book where, all of these principles are applied in your life, whether you're at work or at home with your wife, with your kids, or negotiating. So his first point is getting people to know, right? Because when you get somebody to say no, he says, they're able to now feel like they have more control over the situation. So then you would you have to read the book. If you can apply certain phrases in certain situations, try to get them to say no, then they feel like they have more power. But he said the second most important thing, not the second most important thing, but another topic in the book was him allowing people to have the space, like taking that break in the sentence to just allow things to rest, right? So say I'll ask you a question, right? And then just being able to be quiet and allowing the silence in the conversation,
it's important,
to speak for itself. And eventually, of course, in the book he showed that when you do that, people then open up a little bit more about whatever they were trying to communicate. So you gotta go read the book to understand what I'm saying. It's called Tactical Empathy. I listened to it on Audible, but it was a really good book. Really good book.
So I think we good. I think that wraps up everything.
Yeah, man.
Make sure you communicate. That's, you know what I'm saying? Talk to people, listen, observe, all those stuff, and also give people space to prep. You know what I'm saying? Give people space to recharge. I think that's all very important, and I think that concludes our video.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see you next week. This video will be dropped on Monday. YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. See you soon.